Welcome back to Retro's Vault, the JDM Vault, where revs hit red and legends are reborn. If it's got a Rising Sun badge, it's got a home here. Today we're dialing back to 1986 to meet the Mazda RX-7 GXL, a rotary-powered rocket that spins like a DJ at a Tokyo nightclub. Retro's Vault, now unlocking the imports that change the game. Buckle up, this Winkle Wonder is about to sing. Here's a fun nugget about the 1986 Mazda RX-7 GXL. This wasn't just a Japanese sports car shipped overseas. It was particularly tailored for American tastes. Chief Project Engineer Akio Uchiyama looked at the sales charts for the first-gen RX-7 and saw a very clear pattern. The US market loved it. So, when it came time to design the FC, Mazda didn't just think about what worked in Japan. They dialed in the recipe for American drivers as well. Think of it like a chef who knows their audience. Sure, the dish is authentically Japanese at its core, but there's a little extra seasoning just for the people across the Pacific. The FC styling borrowed some cues from the Porsche 944 and Camaro, two shapes that Americans couldn't get enough of in the 80s. Underneath, it had the performance chops to satisfy driving enthusiasts from California canyons to East Coast highways. This wasn't about diluting the RX-7's character. It was about making sure it fit perfectly into American garages and, more importantly, American hearts. And judging by how many RX-7s you still spot at US car meets, Uchiyama and his team absolutely nailed the brief. It's a reminder that sometimes the road to success runs straight through the customer's driveway. When Mazda's development team, led by Chief Project Engineer Akio Uchiyama, began sketching out the second-gen RX-7, codenamed the FC, they had one big goal in mind: win over the American market. After all, that's where most first-gen RX-7s have flown off the lot. The result? A sleek, clean design that kept the uncluttered style of the original while borrowing a little DNA from Europe and America. From certain angles, you could spot the Porsche's 944 silhouette in the hatchback's curves, with a rear end that had a pinch of Camaro swagger. Yet the RX-7 still stood out as uniquely Japanese, more sushi knife than Swiss Army. Attention to detail was everywhere. The doors sported triple seals, keeping out wind, water, and probably the occasional gossip. The rear wiper? Mounted vertically to slice through the air with less drag, because every little bit counts at speed. Then there was the flash-to-pass port. Pure genius. Instead of popping up the retractable quartz headlights, Mazda tucked a small slush mount window ahead of them, letting you flash the car in front without interrupting your aero flow. It was stylish, clever, and just a little cheeky, much like the RX-7 itself. Under the hood of the 86 RX-7 GXL lurked something special: the 1308cc 13BT turbo twin rotor engine. Think of it as a sewing machine crossed with a jet engine. Compact, smooth, but with serious punch when spooled up. This wasn't just any rotary. It packed a single twin-scroll turbocharger, feeding off the 4-port intake design reminiscent of Mazda's early 13B engines from the late 70s. Retro soul, modern boost. Mazda skipped fancy variable intake systems and the 6PI setup, keeping things straightforward. Instead, it ran with multi-point electronic fuel injection, 4 injectors borrowed from the 13B DEI, and a compression ratio of 8.5 to 1, perfect for playing nice with boost. The result? A very noticeable bump in torque, making city cruising and highway pulls feel a lot more muscular. By the later years of this engine, output sat at about 185 horses and at 6,500 RPM, and a healthy 183 foot-pounds of torque at just 3,500 RPM. That meant you didn't have to scream it to redline to get it moving, though let's be honest, rotary lovers always do. The 13BT didn't just purr. It wound up like a turbine and hit with a surge that made you grin, reminding you why boosted rotaries are pure mechanical poetry. When it came to putting all that 13BT's power to the pavement, Mazda gave you 2 paths: the purist playground or the cruiser's comfort zone. Translation: either the standard 5-speed manual or the 4-speed automatic. The 5-speed manual was the enthusiast's choice, a gearbox that begged to be stirred like a pot of ramen broth on a cold night. The throws were short, The engagement crisp, and paired with the Rotary's rev-happy nature, it made every on-ramp feel like a qualifying lap. You weren't just driving, you were conducting a mechanical symphony, each shift a note in the 13BT's turbocharged area. The 4-speed automatic, on the other hand, was for those who preferred their speed with a side of convenience. Smooth and steady, it let you cruise in comfort, more about savoring the journey than wringing every last RPM out of the engine. Sure, it lacked the tactile thrill out of the manual, but in traffic, it was as stress-free as an afternoon in a Kyoto tea house. Either way, the RX-7's drivetrain was engineered to make the most of that turbo Rotary's torque curve, delivering the kind of driving experience that could turn a mundane commute into a miniature road adventure. The second generation RX-7 rode on the FC chassis, and with it came a big leap forward in how the car handled the road. Gone was the old school rigid rear axle, replaced by a fully independent suspension with trailing arms and a clever new trick called the Dynamic Tracking Suspension System, or DTSS. Think of DTSS as a dance partner who knows when to lead and when to follow. They kept the rear wheels aligned and composed, even when you pushed hard into a corner. Up front, Mazda ditched the recirculating ball steering for a more modern rack and pinion setup, giving the RX-7 a sharper, more connected feel to the wheel. It was like switching from a flip phone to a smartphone. Suddenly, everything felt more precise. The GXL trim added even more sophistication with Mazda's auto-adjusting suspension system, borrowed from the 626, which let drivers choose between normal and sport modes depending on whether they were cruising to work or carving up mountain switchbacks. Complementing the DTS rear, the front end used McPherson struts and a wide-base lower A-frame. Mazda even made generous use of forged aluminum to cut down on unsprung weight, making the RX-7 lighter on its feet. The result? A chassis that was every bit as agile as its rotary engine promised. Step inside the 1986 Mazda RX-7 GXL and you'll find an interior that strikes a balance between track day focus and daily driving comfort. The cloth upholstery wraps around supportive seats that hug you just enough to keep you planted during spirited cornering, like a good friend who knows when to give you space and when to hold you tight. Both driver and passenger get the same treatment, so no one feels left out when the road gets twisty. The dashboard is all business, clearly designed with the driver in mind. Controls and gauges are positioned right where your hands and eyes expect them, making quick adjustments as natural as reaching for your coffee in the morning. The clean, uncluttered design still manages to look modern for its era without unnecessary gimmicks, just pure functionality with a touch of style. Despite being a sleek sports car, the RX-7 GXL didn't forget about practicality. A glove compartment and door pockets offer just enough space for essentials, maps, sunglasses, maybe even that emergency pack of Pocky for long drives. It's the kind of cockpit that encourages you to enjoy the drive while quietly reminding you it's ready for both your daily grind and weekend thrills. When it came to the rear end of the 86 RX-7 GXL, Mazda kept things pretty straightforward. Most cars came with a B2000 or B2200 differential, an open 4.1 ratio setup featuring a 41-tooth ring gear and a 10-tooth pinion. Translation? Solid and dependable, but if you floated off the line, you might get a one-tire fire instead of a glorious twin-stripe burnout. For those who wanted a little extra bite, aftermarket options like the Phantom Grip differential were available, giving the RX-7 more traction and balance when powering out of corners. Steering got a modern upgrade too. The GXL featured electronic power steering, which gave you a lighter touch in parking lots without numbing the feel when the road started to twist. It was best of both worlds, easy maneuverability in the city and short response in the canyons. And then there were the brakes. Mazda equipped the 86 RX-7 with disc brakes at all four corners as standard equipment, a serious performance statement for the era. Together, the diff, steering, and braking system gave the GXL a personality that balanced reliability with just enough room for driver mischief, like a student who aces the test but still doodles flames in the margins. The RX-7 GXL had dimensions that struck a sweet balance between agility and stability, with the difference between a nimble cat and a solid guard dog. Measuring 168.9 inches in length, it was compact enough to weave through tight city streets, yet long enough to give it a sleek, athletic profile. At 66.5 inches wide, it planted itself on the road with confidence, giving you stability without feeling bloated. Its height of just 49.8 inches kept the center of gravity nice and low, perfect for slicing through corners without leaning like a top-heavy SUV. The 95.7-inch wheelbase contributed to its precise handling, keeping the ride lively but not twitchy, kind of like a dancer who knows exactly when to spin and when to hold the pose. Curb weight came in between 2,696 and 2,851 pounds, depending on options. That's light enough to keep the 13 BT's power feeling punchy, but solid enough that crosswinds wouldn't send you drifting into the next lane. All told, these dimensions gave the RX-7 GXL its Goldilocks proportions. Not too big, not too small, but just right for a car that wanted to be both a daily driver and a weekend thrill machine. The GXL brought plenty to the table, and not just in the looks good parked outside the coffee shop department. Strengths? Let's start with the handling. Thanks to the dynamic tracking suspension system, low center of gravity, and balanced weight distribution, the RX-7 carved corners like a sushi chef with a freshly sharpened knife. The turbo rotary delivered smooth, high-revving power with a character unlike any piston engine, a mechanical song that begged you to keep your foot in it. Styling was another win, blending European inspiration with unmistakable Japanese flair, while the driver-focused cockpit made you feel like Mazda designed the car just for you. Of course, no rose is without thorns. Rotary engines, while thrilling, can be a bit needy. Oil consumption, apex seal wear, and the occasional "why is it smoking" moment were all part of the ownership experience. Fuel economy wasn't exactly a bragging point either, and the open differential in non-LSD models could make spirited launches feel a little bit one-sided. Still, for enthusiasts willing to give it the care it deserved, the RX-7 GXL was, and still is, a rewarding drive. It's the kind of car that turns even a quick grocery run into an excuse for a spirited detour. The 1986 Mazda RX-7 GXL was more than just a sports car. It was a statement, a perfect blend of Japanese engineering finesse, European styling cues, and that unmistakable rotary spirit. It proved that performance could come in a lightweight, stylish, and engaging package. From its clever flash-to-pass ports to its turbo-fed 13B engine, this was a car that didn't just drive. It danced, sang, and occasionally whispered, "Go on, just one more lap." Sure, it had its quirks. The rotary could be temperamental, fuel stops came more often than coffee breaks, and if you weren't careful with maintenance, it might start speaking in smoke signals. But for those who understood it, the RX-7 offered a driving experience as pure and addicting as your favorite track on repeat. Now, the question is, if you could take the wheel of any rotary-powered Mazda, would the 86 GXL be your pick, or would you go for another RX-7 generation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your picks and why. And if you enjoyed this trip down JDM memory lane, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And as always, keep it boosted, keep it classic.